Life is a complex interplay between the individual and the group and the surrounding environment. There's a kind of intersubjective collective that develops because we as individuals and a group have a collective memory as well as individual memory. And that intersubjective collaboration creates an indirect object that sort of just floats out there, and it causes willing agents, okay? Often I think that this is a contributor to the notion of God, this intersubjective, indirect, causal force that it can act through willing agents, but it can also act through people that unconsciously act for it. They don't really realize that they are acting for it because, that collective is also going to contain the deterministic ideas of the group that have evolved through evolution, through things that are beyond our control. That collective causal intellectual essence is also going to be the, distributor of common sense in a lot of cases. And when I say common sense, I'm not talking about like the nonsense common sense of people who always think that they have common sense. I'm talking about your five senses and observations coming from and about them. Real common sense, okay? We have to realize that intellectual essence, culture, or basically just information at this point, has a real causal effect. No single one of us or group has a control over it, although a lot of people would like to. It's still just out there causing, okay? One thing that's sort of scary about the human intellectual space is that it seems like anything that a human can do, a human will do. There will be people out there that do these things just because they can and nobody else has done it. And this, I guess, a desire to have your identity recognized. I want to talk about the interplay between objective reality and being and subjective creativity and the feedback intellectual landscape we see in the world and how it plays out in our minds too. Let's define objective and subjective first. Objective. Objective refers to things that exist or hold truth independently of personal feelings, opinions, or perspectives. An object fact is true regardless of who observes it, often grounded in empirical evidence, logic, or external reality. Subjective. Subjective refers to things shaped by personal experience, emotions, or perception. A subjective statement reflects an individual's inner viewpoint rather than external facts. Subjectivity is central to aesthetics, emotions, and moral intuition, acknowledging that meaning or truth can vary between people based on perspective and context. A reliable way to think about a subjective truth is that, in reality, it doesn't defy objective reality, right? If you have a subjective idea that defies objective reality, it's not true. You can think it, but it's just a subjective belief. It's a subjective belief, and belief and truth are not the same. And there's a lot of interplay in the middle, and so that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. So what's interesting is determinism versus imagination. We as humans can dream and create imagery in our minds that's not physically possible in the world. I think a lot of it's just drawing parallels between what we see, like a winged horse with a single horn on its head. We see all these elements out in the animal world. A concept like architecture is built up from thousands of years of trial and error. Then the architecture becomes stylized by the cultural aspects of the place and the time. So you could basically argue that the functional aspect of architecture is just the objective science of it, and the appearance of it is, the cultural particular of the time, the art, the aesthetic. It's ultimate sin to allow the aesthetic to compromise the functionality, okay? And you see that a lot. I mean, I hate to say this, but people that lower their cars, okay? Okay, you like the way it looks, but you've now basically created, a combustion engine concrete sled. It's totally dysfunctional. And I think reasonable people would consider this a sin against functionality. Buildings and houses serve a necessary purpose, but there's room there to stylize and maintain functionality. The design particularities built on top of the functional aspect are examples of collective memory and subjective being injected back into the physical environment and becoming objective being in themselves. Those buildings exist as objects now. This is what trips me out, okay? A Greek statue, it starts as a piece of marble, a completely determined material created by the processes of the universe. We chisel that marble out from a quarry. It becomes an object once it's removed. Before it's removed, it's more like a material, right? Once we break it away, it becomes a rough block. Then a sculptor chisels an image into the block. Some sculptors are better than others. But whether they are better or worse, they are transferring a subjective representation into a material placeholder. So that statue, if all life was to die out, remains an object in space. But that object still retains the history of a subjective injection into its existence. So the point I'm trying to make and what I'm trying to do is to help you look out at your physical reality differently. As a human being, what you are is developed over hundreds of thousands of years through processes that you have limited control over. But your environment takes on all kinds of subjective imprints, especially in the city. The skyscrapers, the roads, the cars, your devices are all products of subjective injection into physical reality. Those objects all have objective being and purpose. The more complex they are, the more subjective injection and layering there is. That purpose encapsulates the life of humanity. I mean, these things are designed for us. These objects wouldn't be designed and have purposes for humans unless humans use their subjective design, collective capability and planning to create them to serve humans, so our lives as a collective are trapped in these objects. Your cell phone is the apex of human art in a way. These objects have functional purposes, but in some sense, they're still just objects. So really the goal of the video is just to highlight the notion that subjectivity is not just something that lives in the head of uninformed individuals. Subjectivity is something that is represented and injected into the physical environment around us, as well as our ability to imagine. If you moved out into the forest and it was just you out there, what do you call it? Homesteading, right? You're not going to get a lot of that subjective feedback from creations from your environment, because the environment is something that has evolved from life. And a lot of that, I think it's interesting too that nature itself is so full of life and the city's so bereft of that spirit of nature. The spirit of nature encompasses the quote-unquote design aspects of the entire universe. So it's much more vast and beautiful than our small inventions. Yet it doesn't really serve us, right? It's effectively indifferent to us. But the city serves us, but it's bereft of natural spirit in a way, because our minds are effectively so small. Our memory, we're somnambulistic. We forget the things that happened just, yesterday. Our collective memory is not something that each one of us as individuals attain. It's like our Library of Alexandria. It keeps us going, and it's our most cherished gem, and now it's disseminated to everybody, and it's beautiful and it's tragic. If you guys like this kind of philosophical subject matter, help us out by liking the video and subscribing to the channel.